I kicked out my girlfriend and her son after inviting her ex to my house. Told me I had no right, she'd get me evicted and take my apartment from me. Me and my girlfriend, Sarah, have been together for 4 years. She has a son, Nathan, with her ex Mark. Sarah has full custody of Nathan, and her ex has scheduled visitations for one weekend of every month. Sarah and Nathan moved in with me a little over a year and a half ago, and from my perspective, it was a little rocky at first. I've always been pretty protective of my space, so making room for 2 other people was difficult for me. When Sarah moved in with me, we agreed that Mark's visit would be held in our apartment as long as I was home. The main reason I wanted this is because I don't know Mark that well, and I don't want him wandering around our apartment without me there. When we proposed this idea to Mark, he was fine with it. Now, moving on to the real issue. 3 weeks ago, it had been 4 months since Mark's last visit, so I asked Sarah when he was planning on visiting Nathan. My girlfriend replied by shrugging her shoulders and telling me she'd ask. She never followed up with it. So a few days ago, I asked when Mark's next visit was, and Sarah said she'd tell me when she knew. Nathan was in the living room but had apparently overheard us and shouted something along the lines of "Dad was here last weekend. Remember?" Sarah's face immediately dropped, and when I asked what Nathan meant, she wouldn't give me a direct answer. Eventually she ended up telling me that for the past 2 visits, Mark had been to our apartment when I was working. When I accused her of going back on our agreement, she kept telling me this was her home too, and she could invite whoever she wanted, and that it was fine because she was here and watching. I told her that was beside the point and that she violated my trust. It blew up into a huge argument that ended in me telling her to get out of my apartment. She packed up and left with Nathan. Last I heard, she was staying with her parents. I've gotten several messages from both Sarah and her parents calling me in a shoal for kicking Sarah and Nathan out of their home for something so small. She's even been blasting me on Instagram and Facebook about how horrible I am to do this to her. It's got me thinking I might be the but I'm not entirely sure yet. I can see why it's important, but the court order was instructed because of Mark having a criminal record. I'm not sure what it's for, as Sarah has never directly told me and I didn't want to push her to tell me. Update. Firstly, on Monday, I had a locksmith come by in order to change the locks, which I got the go-ahead from my landlord, and I ordered a new door camera that should be coming in sometime next week. After that, I didn't hear from my ex until Tuesday, when she called me from a number I didn't recognize in order to apologize. She started crying over the phone, begging me to take her back and that she made a mistake and how awful it was being back at her parents' house. She complained that everything was a mess and that there was a smell she hated. She even promised to never bring Mark over again as long as she could move back. I ended up telling her that she had lost my trust and that I wasn't going to move past this simply because she was having a difficult time at her parents' house. I told her this was her consequence for breaking the one thing I asked her to do when she moved in. When she realized I wasn't budging, it was like a flip had been switched. She started screaming at me, using lots of colorful language. Among the list of swears, she told me I had no right kicking her out of her home, that I was criticizing her as a parent, that I was manipulative and ignorant, and that nobody would ever love me because not even she loved me. Before she hung up, she told me she'd get me evicted and take my apartment from me. I blocked the number after. I ended up emailing my landlord in order to see if there was any way she could get me evicted. I've been pretty good friends with his son for a while. He ended up calling me and laughing about the whole situation, telling me that legally she has no ground to stand on since her name was never on the lease. According to him, she was simply alive and guest until her name was added. Thank goodness it never was. This brings us to earlier this morning when my ex woke me up to call me and repeated most of the things I listed above. Apparently, she had contacted my landlord and he had hung up on her. By the end of it, I told her to stop contacting me and that we were over for good. I blocked her father's number as well.